I'm going to do a quick story today. This one's going to be called Twitchy's Christmas Miracle. So, celebrating the season, we're going to see if we can put together a nice little Christmas story with a little bit of a horror bent. So, again, Twitchy's Christmas Miracle by J. Wilburn. Let's jump right into this one. Alright. The ship rocked on the end of its anchor out on the stormy sea. This island had no safe harbor. So Twitchy and his helpers rowed in through, let's say, not use two prepositions together, rowed through the broken ice on the skid. Lightning cut through the heavy snowstorm to outline the shape of the island in deathly white with deep shadows for the interior. Pressing through the dirty slush and ice shards gathered on the shore. Twitchy and his rebels pressed harder until they were sure they'd cut into the sand, into the gray sand. They were cold and wet enough without stepping a boot into the lapping waves. As he walked out, no, not two prepositions together, as he walked onto the shore, he stopped short of the dead foliage. It was almost always winter here, so he could not imagine when these plants had time to grow. With numb lips, Twitchy managed an off-tune whistle. The other elves behind him stiffened at the sound as they listened with the pointed tips of their ears showing signs of frostbite. The barrel of the weapon emerged first. Twitchy stood his ground, but was certain in that moment he and his fellows were under attack. If he'd been right, there'd be nowhere to go for cover. Certainly not quickly. The barrel, the nozzle of the weapon proved to be plastic as it hopped into full view in the next lifeless flash of light. The plastic thing had googly, not sure if I'm spelling that right. Nah, I'll leave it. Had googly eyes that rolled with madness. The plastic trigger grip and edges had melted over the years. A bit of jelly oozed, half frozen from the bore, like mucus or coagulated blood. Alright. Googly, thank you. These are always things I end up checking later. Appreciate the help. It's one of those words that spell check will never find for you, so I appreciate you being there for me, Millie. Caught some of your streams in the recorded version, so I've kind of been a day or so behind you every time I've watched, but I've watched through several and I like what you're doing, so again, keep up the good work. Appreciate you dropping on to join me for a little while. Alright, before the elves could react to this reveal, gloved hands dug into the frosty sand and pulled a torso free from under the frozen plants. A spring followed that, and a poorly painted box dragged a furrow after it. That's sweet. Just have something going on, so it's hard to catch people's streams. I'm glad I could make it today, though. Oh yeah, I appreciate you coming in. I know how it is. You schedule your own stuff, and then you got life in between, and then you try to catch other people's. I always try to pop on at weird times and see if I can find somebody, and always look for other writing streams too, just to kind of see what other people are doing. I'm always hoping there'll be more and more of us on there, kind of sharing some different things. A spring followed that, and a poorly painted box dragged a furrow after it. It was a jack in the box, but this was no jack. Revealing, no, I've already used revealing. This was no jack emerged from the lid. Alright, that should be the same paragraph. Then the horse thing. Not a rocking horse. Such a thing would have made it out of the workshop and straight to some kid on the nice list long ago. This thing was wrong. Its motions unnatural. Sometimes the legs bent in some possessed direction. That would give any child nightmares. It found its way forward with the other misfits. Let me make this more universal. They all found their ways forward. The misfits abandoned on this isolated island forever. All of them dropped here for the crime of existing. Twitchy had been dropped too, but now Christmas would belong to all of them again. He managed another whistle, and his helpers opened their sacks for the monstrosities to crawl inside one after the other, long after there should have been no room left. The magic material they had stolen from the saint himself still had more space for toys. Alright, let's do a scene break. He had, alright, let's give his name because we Twitchy had no ambitions to circle the world in a single night. That level of magic was beyond him and always would be. But he could do what he needed on a single street. He could have chosen any, but he settled on the 12 houses that made up the short stretch of Elliston Street in Bremore, Tennessee. Some of these names and such details I've wrote down on a post-it note just so I wouldn't have to think everything up on the spot. Okay, stretch of Ellison Street. He and his helpers split up. Turn 12 to dozen. It's the same meaning but a little less specific. Okay, he and his helpers split up to plant the special toys in all the houses. Every family on this street had children. Every one of them was on the nice list, even if a few of them had cut it close. They would all get gifts this year. Gifts like no others. He divided. Let's make it they. They divided the toys evenly. When they started to run out, they used the portal hoops they'd gathered from the island. When those ran out, there were plenty of stocking stuffers to go around. All those small things stuffed into socks over the fireplace were always misfits of a sort. Maybe they were never condemned to the island, but stocking stuffers were usually the afterthought, and every house on Elliston got stockings full that night. Lastly, Twitchy the elf gathered his forces at the head of the neighborhood where Elliston met Baker Street. They were in no hurry because they wanted to watch the results of their work. Twitchy took out one last misfit toy that he'd saved for himself. The dark blade rose to the clear sky over Tennessee. Twitchy slashed with the hide and sickle and blacked out the stars. He swept back, he swept the other direction and shattered the moon. As the pieces of it fell, the dark elf cut again and again, hiding the street under a veil that not even the great saint's eyes would spot this year. This postage stamp of land was now Twitchy's domain, and every soul on Elliston was on his list now. Alright, scene break, and now we will go to Christmas morning. The families woke up at different times, but most were confused and groggy. None of them could seem to get a call out. TV reception was spotty, even on the fireplace channel. Alright. Internet was slow, and all their Alexas seem to keep losing the Christmas channels. The Simpsons, with their younger kids on the corner, let's say in the house on the corner of am I spelling this the same way every time? Yeah. Elliston and Baker woke first. The dark seemed to hold on longer than it should have. Some sunlight filtered through Twitchy's veil finally, and the family confused it for an overcast day instead of the evil curse it was. The water gun that, let me put pistol. The water pistol that spit out jelly tore free from its package before the Simpsons' youngest daughter even touched the paper. That impatience, along with Mr. Simpson's quick fatherly instincts, saved his daughter that morning. the jelly that had time to thaw now burned through the carpet and the subfloor under that. Simpson pulled his kids away, and his wife joined in the rescue. They were halfway up the hall as the jelly sprayed the walls and started melting their dining room table. Next door at the Buckner house, they weren't as lucky. The kids were older, and Mr. Buckner had slowed with age. His son turned... Alright, hold on. Let's make this specific. Buckner's son turned the stubborn crank on the side of the box. It seemed too large a thing, even for a novelty. The music, let's say discordant music tumbled out note by note, like the soundtrack of a nightmare. At the last moment, Buckner leaned over to his wife and said, "Why did you buy that?" Her eyes went wide and her mouth tightened into a pale line before she said, "You're not funny." He didn't get it, but didn't have a chance to ask before the wrath in a box burst forth and ruined their Christmas. Gilliam was a single dad and doing the best he could with his 3 kids on his own. He'd bought presents through the year and saved them to give his kids the best Christmas possible. He was quite suspicious of the oversized, misshapen present in the middle of his living room. Did I misspell misshapen? Nah. Alright. As the retching horse, alright, I'm inventing a toy here, I think. It's the retching horse burst forth from its wrapping. He drew a hold on. Gilliam drew a butcher knife from the block, and with his kids behind him, he fought bravely for his life and theirs. Alright. Moving on down the street. The Vinson family had 10 kids, ranging from 18 to 4. The bigger kids joined their parents in slaying the Tickle Me Hydra, but its heads kept coming back. That was until Billy Vinson, one of the middle boys, remembered his mythology reading and got a blowtorch from the garage. They had a new set of problems at that point, though. There we go. Alright, we'll move up the street again. The Kirkland family was lucky. With the two boys, they always got a board game for the whole family to play. When the kids unwrapped a game called Spike in the Face, they backed away from the warped box lid that was water damaged and spotted with black mold. Something shook inside, and Mr. Kirkland threw the box whole into their roaring fireplace. It smoldered from being so wet, but finally caught. Something in the flames sprung with a sharp snap, like a bear trap, and a spike broke into the bricks inside the fireplace. Hooray for the Kirklands. They've won Christmas. All right. All right. In other homes, including the Snyders, the Duffy family, the Wilders, the Osborns, and the James family. Oh, I'm glad you like it. I've kind of been sitting on this story idea for a while. Obviously, it's kind of a horror take on the consequences of the Island of Misfit toys. I always felt like there was more horror potential there than had ever been tapped, so we'll see where this is going. I'm already kind of rethinking the ending, so we'll see what happens. And James and the James family discovered the portal hoops first. Unlike the more monstrous of the Misfit toys, these did not reveal their danger in time. A few children fell into other dimensions from which they could not return. others opened portals for other things not meant for this world to crawl out. They had their hands full, and not everyone survived Christmas that year. Let's say the year Twitchy and his elves visited Elliston Street. Alright, so we bring it back to the elves still being there. Alright, let's kind of wrap up this. The stocking stuffers might have been the worst, but it was the Orr family who had to deal with this fact. Their house sat at the very end of Elliston, on the bowl of the cul-de-sac. All right, the cul-de-sac. Twitchy had run out of special toys by the time they reached the Orrs. So the let me put a comma. So the Orr family opened all their gifts, let's say ordinary gifts, with joy, as the rest of the neighborhood fought in mortal terror. The Orrs did their stockings last, and often forgot all about them until later in the day. It was Trevor, the youngest, who remembered this year. They, hold on, we'll do a new paragraph. They walked into the TV room walked into the TV room to find the stockings twisting and pulsing on their hooks over the fireplace. They had the good sense to back away, but the small prizes, let's say surprises, small surprises inside started crawling out on their own. Twitchy laughed as the first few survivors ran out into the street looking for help, only to find their neighbors screaming in terror as well. The dark elf lifted his hands and growled, "I hope you all have the merriest of Christmases in your safe houses and your safe little lives." No one paid attention to him in the chaos, but that wasn't important. Then the magic dome over Elliston shattered to bright blue sky. The pieces fell in large chunks. People covered their heads, but the curse broke apart in harmless shadows before hitting the ground. The sleigh pulled by the saints' beasts flew low over Twitchy's head. His helpers cried out and retreated toward Baker Street without him. The saint used his whip to drive back the terrible misfits that were never meant to encounter humanity. He did not have the power to slay them, nor could he save everyone on Elliston that day. Hold on, let me fix one spelling here. But he did rescue most. He closed the portals before the world could end. And he gathered the misfit toys into an empty sack. Lastly, he gave his battle cry. Ho, ho, and ho. Then he and his light elves gathered up Twitchy and his rebel faction. Every family on Elliston remembered that Christmas. A few of them moved within the next year. Others dared to stay. All of them believed in the saint of Christmas. From that day forward, and always strove to remain on the on the nice list. Let's do one more scene break. I could probably keep it in the same scene just to wrap it up cleanly, but I'll make a break here. Twitchy spent most nights on the sandy shore. That's a gray sandy shore of the island that was now his home. He stared into the snowy distance over the dark waves, waiting for a ship to wander along and to give him and his helpers, I'll say his fellow misfits, another chance at vengeance. In the midst of lightning flashes, another blast of colorful light showed the passing of the saint. More misfits punished for the crime, let's make it sin, for the sin of existing, fell toward the island on their colorful, let's say parachutes, on their parachutes painted like peppermint. Let's make this a dialogue. One day, your sleigh will fall. Twitchy growled over the fluid, settling deep in his lungs. One day you will fall, and we will all stand over you to celebrate. He coughed into his arms as snow gathered in his green hair. Many creatures watched him from the shadows with their googly eyes. And that is it. We now have a 1800, about 1900 word story called Twitchy's Christmas Miracle. And so that's sort of my riff off of the Island of Misfit toys and the consequences of such a unnerving concept in the Christmas traditions.